But it is also referred to a lot of times in the Christian church as Three Kings Day. Now, Verna kind of touched on it. I don't know if you heard it, but she kind of made mention that kings, wise men, we're really not sure. The one thing that we are sure of, though, is that they were, believe it or not, astrologers. And yet, as your pastor, I would not be a big fan of you following astrology as your choice. And yet, I have stood and talked with individuals, and I mean, probably well more than half our two churches, often make references to astrology. And they make reference to whether they are a Gemini, which is probably where most of the great people of the world should be. You know, not that the pastor follows that, or was born June the 10th. But these things, what's interesting is this idea that these astrologers of the time, though, were considered wise men. And they were considered wise because they did also, besides the astrology part, had a bit of a knowledge of astronomy, which astronomers of today would tell you they are nothing like astrologers, and astrologers are not astronomers. But these wise men had a general knowledge of things. They were fairly smart men who spent a lot of time in studying. And this idea that they would follow a star seems to make sense. We said, who put the star there? God put the star there. I mean, most of us would not question where stars came from, that God created the heaven and the earth, and that's part of it. That's one of the easier aspects of Christianity, is accepting creation. There are a whole lot of folks who accept that there is a God, the Creator. They have much more difficult time accepting there's a God, the Messiah. So we look at this, and this epiphany is what we have to realize is, so what does that mean? And I'd often grown up hearing it was the light, and it was this, and actually the Greek translation, and you see in the title, epiphany equals appearing. And you go, well, what appeared besides the star? What really appeared? In this message that Tom read to us, a story, what was appearing at the time? And what appeared was a lot of things. And we're going to go through them in a minute. We appear to find out who Herod really is. We appear to find out who Jesus really is. And we appear to find out how God took the regular, everyday, secular world and brought it into His plan, which you find all throughout the Bible. It is that part that we appear, even on today, we intentionally wanted to complete our vision and our mission today. That was part of like a 6-week plan. That we wanted this to appear in our hands on Epiphany. And Epiphany, or theophany, was the other word that was often used. It was translated from the Greek, and it means appearing or the vision of God. It says an epiphany, from the ancient Greek, is an experience of sudden and striking realization. Generally, the term is used to describe scientific breakthrough, religious or philosophical discoveries. But it can apply to any situation in which an enlightening realization allows a problem or situation to be understood from a deeper perspectives. Epiphanies are studied by psychologists and other scholars, particularly those attempting to study the process of innovation. So those who are inventing things have epiphanies. Janet got me into watching this show called The Big Bang Theory. Said I would never watch that show because I'm one of those jock guys, you know, and I'm not going to watch this guys. And she got me watching this thing after it took almost a year or more, I guess, and it's a pretty funny show. And the one character in there basically found the heaviest, he found the heaviest element of all times, and he did it calculating all this. And well, in the end, he finds out that it actually happened because he made a mistake in the calculation. But because of what he started, someone else found it, and but he couldn't take credit for it. He had two epiphanies. His first was that he founded the heaviest element ever. The second was that he found it accidentally and he couldn't handle it. But either way, you can see that Epiphany created an opportunity for innovation. Even though he realized that it was a mistake and he wanted nothing to do with it, he wanted to run away from the project, he couldn't avoid the fame that went along with it, that even though it was a mistake, you found this. And it was a big deal. Epiphanies happen every day. They're smaller epiphanies. The epiphany, the appearing of God in the form of a child and being acknowledged by the world, is what we celebrate for today. Actually, it says epiphanies, though big ones, are relatively rare occurrences and generally follow a process of significant thought about a problem. Now, we seem to think that these wise men just, sort of like the shepherds. Hey, go to the manger. No. Generally speaking, it's accepted that Jesus is probably about 2 years old by the time this happens. So there had been a lot of opportunity to either disprove or prove that God had come incarnate and that Jesus was born divine. Now, in that, these magi, these great thinkers, had reached the point that they had decided there was more than enough evidence to go seek this out. So where did they go? We think that they went to Herod because they needed his permission. And that's not necessarily the case. They were looking for the King of Kings. Where would you go to look for the king? You would go to the palace. And that is one of the reasons that the scholars think that they went to Herod first. That they went there looking for the King of Kings, thinking that the king of the Jews at the time, which Herod was, would have all the information. Now, one of the first things that begins to appear to us is the character of Herod. Herod, we come to learn later at the crucifixion of Christ, is a man of questionable character. But at this point, he was the king of choice of the Jews. He actually kind of let them do what they wanted to do. He actually probably even used their religion as a way of controlling them. They thought that he was giving them the opportunity to practice, but he was actually using that because generally religious folks, faithful folks, are well-behaved individuals. I mean, if you look around the world for today, would that not generally be true? That whether you're Catholic or Jewish or Methodist or Baptist or whatever, other than a few religions who do practice violence, most religions are cooperative people. One, because if they accept a monotheistic view or a godly view, even a polytheistic view, there is something greater than they are. Now, what we see in Herod, though, is that Herod was a leader, but Herod knew that he was not the smartest man on the planet. And that really kind of bothered him. And he really wanted to be well-liked and accepted by those who are intelligent. Kind of reminds me of, unfortunately, a lot of folks today. You know, I tell folks, I can put lots of letters at the end of my name, and I'm fortunate enough that I can say I've got letters at the end of my name. And in reality, they're not worth nearly as much as what I believe that my cowboy way is when I put my hand out and I shake hands and I say a deal's a deal. But Herod wanted more than that. Herod wanted to be accepted by those who were perceived to be smarter than him. And he wanted to be in their circles. So these magi come to him and they start looking. Now what I didn't realize as I got doing my research, do you know that it was only 7 miles from Herod to where the Magi found the baby? 7 miles. Now, think of this. He sent them out and didn't even send a spy to monitor them. Now, for those of you who served in the military at all or have any strategy as a coach or someone like that sort, if it's that close and you're not sure these strangers are going to follow your rules, I would think that you'd send someone out to make sure. But what Herod wanted is he wanted to be accepted by the smart guys. So when they came to him and seeking them, he thought, wow, I'm really kind of cool. So we see the first character flaw in him is his insecurity. His desire, even though he was the king of the land, the ruler of the land, he wanted to be liked. He wanted the smart people to bring him into his group. Something we have to be very careful of as Christians in today's world. We want non-believers to like us. And we tend to water down our beliefs so they will like us. And in reality, they're never going to change anyway. They've made up their minds. So what we have here is that Herod wants them, he wants to be liked. He then looks at him and he says, would you go out and you go find them. You go find the king. And when you find him, come back and tell me. All right, come back and tell me. 7 miles. He doesn't know these men at all. Has no idea who these guys are. None whatsoever. So he sends them out to search and doesn't send anyone to follow up. They find Jesus. They worship him. We know the gifts that they bring. And they truly realized this was the appearance of the living God incarnate. But as they got ready to leave, guess what? They received a vision from an angel. Now these were pagans. Magi, like astrologers are today, they weren't necessarily godly folks. They simply knew that this was to be the King of Kings. God, again, took the confirmation of society. One of the things that Magi did was they would make things divine. They had the authority to call you divine. That they could come in and they could look at you. And they could look at Amy and go, Amy, because of what you have done as virtue, as a Magi, I call you divine. Meaning God and human. Now, the Bible strictly forbids any human from doing that. But God used a pagan way of life to confirm all things again. We hear the same things happening in the story at Easter time. That he takes people who are not godly and brings them in to use them for godly things. There's multiple reasons for it. One of the epiphanies it should be to each and every one of us is God is going to take us where we are, as we are, and use us for his good if we allow him. The Magi did that. So now they're getting ready to leave. The angel appears and says, don't go back to Herod. Don't go back there. You go back a different way. Now, again, they had no reason to believe this godly thing, yet they did. So what we see is this appearing of the angel, appearing to the Magi, who were not necessarily Jewish or godly men, and using them for the purpose of God. So now the birth of the Messiah has been confirmed by prophecy. It has now been confirmed by the earthly way of declaring divinity. The Magi acknowledge that Jesus is divine. Well, God certainly didn't need that. It wasn't important, but it was important to those who don't understand theology, those outside the walls of the church. It was important that they could go, wow, these church people, these rabbis are talking about this divine human, and the Magi went there and basically declared him divine as well. It seems like This must be the perfect storm. Matthew confirmed in chapter 1 that this was truly going to be a child of character. Going back to Matthew 1, which we read Matthew 2, the beginning, and for those of you who already know, some of the most boring reading in the whole Bible. Because it is that chapter in the Bible that lack of better information. Job begat Mary, begat Sam, begat in the Old English. It goes down, and it's a genealogy. The reason it's there, though, is Matthew is a biography. He's writing a biography of Jesus. And if you're writing a bio of someone, you want to set something up about their character. You want to prove that they are who they are. If I'm writing about Jackie Robinson, I need to tell you a little bit about the way he was born, and then I need to tell you about why Branch Rickey thought he was a great player in baseball, and why he chose him based on his personality to go in and be the first black player in baseball. Well, how is it? And Branch Rickey would say, this is what I saw in him and his lifestyle. This is what I knew about the way he was raised. Okay? Matthew says, the first thing I have to prove to you is that he meets prophecy. And it says, he will be a descendant of David. When that genealogy is finished, he's not only a descendant of David on his father's side, he's a descendant of David on Mary's side as well. He continues to talk about the character of Mary and Joseph. And this will be a child of character because he comes from good parents. We've all said that. Our kids are playing with somebody. I like their family. I like the kid. I do all of that. So if there's another great appearing, it is that Matthew writes this and he shares that this will be a prominent individual with parents who are virtuous, and his background introduces the themes that are relative to his ability to be publicly active. So today, we've recognized many who have answered the call of God in ministry. We've looked at those folks who have thought about what's appearing in their lives. Today, the call is we see what's appearing in Scripture. We have the epiphany of Christ. The question is, what is appearing in our lives? Do people see God with us? Which is what the prophecy said, Emmanuel, God with us. Do people see God with us in our lives? That is what is appearing. Do they see God with us appearing in our churches? Do they see God appearing when we go to work? So today, when we come to the table, we get to come and seek our own epiphany. The epiphany that we want God to appear in us. We want us to appear godly to others. And when we come, you may be committing for the first time your life to Jesus Christ. You may be recommitting for the 100th time. But today, come asking that someone will see something appearing in you